So, my guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast is Kyle Asperger. Now, Kyle is the creator of anarchyforaday.com, where he redefines anarchy as a tactical differentiator. He teaches leaders how to rethink the rules, apply them to their organizations, and importantly, in my book, carve out their own blue oceans. He's got a decade of agency experience and a coaching style that some people have described as blunt, spontaneous, and unfiltered. Basically, I think it means Carl cuts out the fluff and uncovers the truth. This is somebody we need to hear from. Welcome to the podcast, Carl.
Neil, what an intro, man. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you, Carl. And this whole anarchy thing, I mean, I'm fascinated by this proposition. And I guess before we kind of get into the services and everything you do and all the kind of experiences that you've had kind of doing this particular kind of coaching work, is I want to know, why anarchy? Is there something within Carl that kind of inspires that, perchance?
I think just throughout the years, I've done a terrible job of blending in. Not that I've tried to set myself apart. My just inner wiring is such that if everybody zigs, I kind of zag in my own way. And in a lot of ways, that kind of falls in line with the definition of anarchy. I mean, I think dictionary has anarchy as to say, like, just destroy everything and cause complete and utter chaos. But, anarchy, language, it's a human construct, so we can assign meaning to something. We just simply need collective buy-in. So I'm here championing the notion, the concept that we can very simply rethink the more classic application that is anarchy and say, all right, well, if we are a little bit more tactical about how and when we apply this sort of anarchist's mindset of, okay, maybe if everybody goes left, I go right. Perhaps that's the moment that we can find innovation, because throughout the years when these moments of innovation hit me, it's because, okay, well, this is something that's different. Others aren't doing it. Something is innately unique, and that's where innovation lies. Look at any inventions throughout the years, throughout the decades, centuries. Innovations, inventions. These people weren't going by the status quo. They weren't doing what everybody else was doing. They dared to essentially think a little bit differently about something.
Do you think kind of what we're facing, and I guess, where you're based, where I'm based, and where anybody listening or watching this around the world is probably feeling right now that these are turbulent times. I mean, politically, economically, socially, environmentally, I mean, whichever way you look at it, this is a time for the innovator. This is a time for those who are willing to kind of push out a little bit beyond and not kind of stay in a risk and sort of fearful mindset. Would you say that this is almost the perfect storm?
It is a wild world that we live in right now, and where everything is AI wise too. It's very difficult for me to not live in this like doom and gloom sort of mentality. So when I speak, I try to speak as realistically as possible. So I if anybody has issue with stuff I say, just email me afterward and just chew me out for what I said. But marketing itself, here's a very honest take. I have never felt so disconnected from this world of marketing, because so much of it is now being taken over by AI, that all of these different systems is just, it's all automated. And my dad was a big point of inspiration for me to get into marketing in the first place. He comes from that kind of Mad Men era of I think he retired in law firm marketing, but law firm marketing may not seem all that exotic end of day. And I think, truth be told, it's probably not the most creatively invigorating, but he managed to do something that for many is an impossible concept. He made law firm marketing funny, legitimately. And he did it in a very classy way. And that was something that has always stayed with me, from my young days, of the moment that he showed me this campaign in whatever the dossier was that he showed us. Um, but if you can manage to make the legal field mildly entertaining, there's something to be said about that. And so that was the moment that kind of like opened up my mind to say, like, all right, well, marketing can be very creatively stimulating depending on how you handle it, almost regardless the vertical. But the opportunity to do that these days, unless you have the huge budgets, it it is just a very weird space. And with all this, like the robots taking over and doing all that, I'm like, the joy just isn't there the same way it used to be. Does that make sense?
It does. Do you think it kind of comes from, because we've never been taught this kind of mindset of being a free spirit, having free will is kind of, we're almost taught, a whole education system from when you're really young is you follow the rules, you follow the textbook. This is what it says. This is the process. Here's the system. You slot into it. We're not taught to be these kind of free thinkers, innovators, are we? And even, in sort of professional qualifications, and a lot of people listening to this will be doing self-development, personal development. They might be on a course or some program. And a lot of it is quite structured and almost to the point of quite rigid. It's like you have to be thinking about, how am I going to be assessed at the end of this? And that's the right or wrong. It's very black and white. It's very kind of binary or linear.
What's the best
We're
way
not talking about that, are we?
succeed? Yeah.
Hmm.
It's weird because I went to school, Miami University in Ohio. Great school. I'm not discounting it, but I have a graphic design degree, and graphic design is it's the visual language that is very simply just getting information to people in the most efficient, attractive way possible. And they taught us really just go get a job in corporate, you work your way up, and then you die. Like, that's it. That's your life. That was the whole thinking. So everything that we did throughout the different courses, everything we did was just to maximize that, just to make sure that we are the best possible graphic designers that we can be. They didn't teach us anything about networking. They didn't teach us anything about business ownership and the pitfalls, the headaches, the stuff that comes with that, like on a daily basis. They didn't teach us any of that. They just said, like, this is how you Photoshop stuff, and taught us to functionally just be a graphic designer. So in a lot of ways, that specific educational path for me, I found it very lacking once I actually came to realize how much I needed to learn the moment that I really kind of got into the real world, very simply put.
It is fascinating, isn't it? Because when you sort of think of it like this, and the way you've just described it there, Carl, this kind of idea that there's almost this sort of unwritten and unsaid kind of layer, if you like, of learning and development. And to be fair, we've all been through that process in some shape or form, either in younger years or as adults. And yet we're kind of almost left to our own devices to then kind of go figure it out. And I guess it's only people who are willing to really sort of embrace that idea of, bit of anarchy, bit of free thinking, bit of innovation, bit of kind of like, I'm going to step outside of the rails that I've been put on and actually see what it feels like. It's only people who are willing to do that who are going to even just be awake and aware of it, because otherwise you wouldn't even see it, would you?
You got to be awake, aware, because the moment that you stray from that path of, okay, well, everybody, corporate, it's safe, for the most part, as long as you're an affable, functional person. The moment you stray from that path and start exploring on your own, really what it means is now you've opened up a path, an opportunity for consistent, damn near daily failure. So, all right, what does failure mean? That just means that you're going to take some hits. So listen to those hits. Okay, what happened in these moments? How do I take this opportunity, learn from it, and perhaps even develop on that? And that's where essentially anything that I speak to, whether in coaching, heck, even in the acting world, it's all of these different moments of failure. Okay, what did I learn from these? Now these are experiences that I take every single opportunity I can to, show people. It's kind of like the mentality of the parent. It's like, I went through this hopefully so that you don't have to. It's to see and diagnose the potential speed bumps that will be encountered along this entrepreneurial path. So hopefully you don't get had by, you know, whoever's out there who's trying to do some not so good business practice, or just, the natural pitfalls that come with this stuff. So.
Do you think it's almost then that the mindset is almost less about, oh, I'm an innovator, I'm an anarchist, but actually more about, I'm going to proactively welcome the chance to fail? And
That,
actually not just say, well, failure is kind of inevitable and I'm going to have it, but actually seek it out. Because if you're right, then actually we do learn, as I think most of us know, if not all of us know, that we learn most from, failures or issues or challenges. So if we actually actively go and seek it and say, okay, I'm going to welcome this stuff in, because if I do, that's what I'm going to learn. That's what I'm going to develop.
yeah.
It seems a very healthy kind of mindset, doesn't it?
Well, it's healthy, but for many, it's terrifying because there are a lot of people who are very risk averse. They don't want to fail. Straining their mind, their physical body. It's simply difficult. It's the people that struggle to get to the gym and push themselves that way. I'm not saying you have to struggle and fail in the gym, but it's part of the whole muscle building process. But it is a similar kind of concept. Um, it really does. Like anarchy cannot happen unless you are open to exactly what you said, Neil. It's just like I'm trying new stuff here. I don't quite know if it's going to work. Hopefully, if it doesn't, I can, shift quickly enough that it doesn't take too much of a hit. But experiment, learn, fail. I don't know. Go do all that stuff. That's the beauty of it. That is kind of what anarchy is. It's just go try out new stuff that other people aren't doing.
Because if we redefine this word failure, we've said it. I mean, both of us have said it a number of times here already. And if we kind of redefine that and say it's not fatal, it's not, an absolute disaster. It is just it's a bit, well, all right, okay, here's a phrase, a building block. So instead of failure, we say, look, if this is a building block and I need to get some failures, stroke building blocks in to be able to learn some stuff, because if everything goes beautifully, I'm not going to learn a thing. I just know I got from there to there and there was a consequence or an outcome and whatever it is. But whereas actually, if we put these building blocks in place and almost welcome them in and say, look, I'm going to be an anarchist, I'm going to really push the boat out here. And I'm looking for these building blocks because I can't actually learn what I need to learn. I can't actually get to the position I really want to get to without sitting on or building upon or layering up these building blocks. To me, that would be a nice way to approach it, because I don't like failing in the traditional definition, but if they were building blocks, I'm going to almost create a little farm of those because I want a load of them,
But that's the awesome. But you yourself, you're an educator too. So, I think certain people really do have this innate appreciation, this inner wiring, just to say, failure is one of the most efficient, effective ways of really implanting a message, whatever it may be. And the people that seek out opportunities to fail, that's what school is. Regardless of what you're studying, school should be that safe environment for you to fail. And there's a lot of opportunities that are not nearly as safe because people kind of hype up. They're like, oh God, I got to get through this, examination period. And like, if I don't make it, I'm not going to get my, master's or PhD, whatever. So I don't mean to trivialize any of that by any means. Education is highly important, but it should also be that opportunity in that space where people fail, because you have the guidance of people who've hopefully gone through it in some manner, and so they can speak from the experience. But I was at a small design agency for about a year and a half, and I kind of realized, I was like, you know what? I know that there's just a whole lot more that I have to learn. it ain't going to happen here. If it does, it's going to take a couple years at least, maybe even longer. But I knew, all right, if I go out and start freelancing, just working for myself, inevitably that's going to provide more opportunity for me to experience the whole of kind of what I need to see, experience, feel, learn how to navigate. And I can promise you, it was rife with failure. But all of that's fed into, well, heck, this conversation.
Hasn't it? And I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Because the more you sort of spend time reflecting on this stuff, you kind of realize actually, I guess we've all of us really been kidding ourselves that we're not perfect. We are absolutely not perfect. And we're trying to kind of almost sort of keep this kind of sense of, public face or personal brand or whatever it is, so that we're kind of seen as, oh, successful, earning a lot, really happy, great relationships, living the dream, and all of these kind of signs of, and I guess social media's to thank for this one, is all these kind of very, very polished and glossy kind of outcome driven things. And what we're saying is, actually, if we can almost, is it rise above it, or is it push beyond it, or is it to say, actually, that stuff's not important? There's a challenge here, isn't there, that we need to kind of make to all those kind of definitions of success, because what we're talking about doesn't really fit there, does it at all?
Well, you've already said it, I think, in a couple stanzas previous, that it's an awareness. A lot of what we are talking about, this opportunity to fail, it takes a very high level of self-awareness. Because, all right, if you're putting yourself out there in such a way that you're doing something different, people are going to take note. That's just how it works. And so, okay, now you're sort of at the center of the public eye. If you're, putting I'm thinking about this from like an acting standpoint. Like, okay, well, you're out there in front of camera. The ability to push past any of those self-conscious feelings so that you can truly explore whatever is in that moment. It's the most organic way of exploration. Typically, that's what reads the best on camera. And that's how these kinds of things work that we're talking about, is these moments of failure is just because you're like, oh, well, maybe I can go this way. And it's difficult without, okay, here's one simple example. Like Sophie, like, she wants to make a lemonade stand. I think a lot of kids would probably say, all right, well, if I put my lemonade stand right in front of my parents' house, then anybody who's driving by, they become my market. But instead, Sophie thought about it a little bit differently. She says, all right, what if I put my lemonade stand outside my dad's construction site? These guys they got the dough, they're thirsty, they're working. Who wouldn't want a good, refreshing lemonade? So, very, very minute sort of circumstance. This is just the simple way of thinking about something differently. She put herself in front of a very thirsty market. And so that small adjustment in her way of thinking, perhaps anarchy, that's what separates her from every other kiddo who's like, all right, I'm putting my lemonade stand in front of my parents' house. So that's a very simple example. I love to use it because it's just, you just take that breath, think through, whatever you're going to, it may not work, but heck, it can't hurt to try.
And that kind of thing it's about the storytelling, isn't it, really? Because it's quite mesmerizing actually when you kind of sort of put yourself in that role of that lemonade stand and just kind of be thinking through, yeah, do you know that there is a differential there, and it, as you say, it's such a small little tuning of a situation. And we're not talking necessarily here about a revolution, could be an evolution of what anybody's already doing. And isn't it interesting actually that when you do stop and think about this, it could be that the stories that are more interesting to tell, you were talking about the design and the communication work that you've been doing in the past, the stories that are probably more interesting to tell are the ones where it is more kind of a roller coaster. There has been a bit of a disaster, and then you came out the other side. I mean, it's the typical film set kind of, film score kind of, isn't it? Really, where there's this moment, it gets worse and worse. And then there's this, oh, the hero comes in, and then suddenly there's there is an upside on the other side. And it's a very Hollywood approach, but that storytelling has to have the downside. It has to have the challenge. It has to have the anarchy moment and the failure, if we call it that, to be an actually engaging story. So why do we always just want to just tell the positive side? Because that would be so super dull, wouldn't
Well,
it?
it's easy. You know how many people are lazy these days? They just want to take the easiest path out. That's it. I mean, nobody cares about the easy path. But that's all we see on social media is just like it's all the stuff that's going so good for everybody. Problem is, if it's real, granted, there's probably a pretty significant amount of work, consistency, failure that's gone into arriving at those stations of perceived success, whatever that may be. So that storyline is, I think, what social media glosses over in a very heavy sense.
So there's somebody listening to this. Then they're a business owner. Let's just say they're a small business owner, and they are, I don't say struggling, but let's just say that there are challenges in their work, challenges in their industry. Maybe they're coming out of a year that has been probably not quite as good as previous years. So, there's some stuff going on,
It's
and they're
tough
looking for differential. So they're looking to kind of kick on. So, it's a story I'm sure that we both heard a lot of. Somebody listening to us talking here will probably, I would imagine, I could be wrong, but probably would imagine will be thinking, well, it's all right for you, Neil and Carl, because whatever. Or, okay, well, you've made it, you've done it, you're okay, you're fine. I look at me in my situation and almost play victim of circumstance rather than necessarily. I'm not saying everybody, of course, but some people will probably sit there and say, it's either not for me or I can't do it. I can't see myself doing this because it's just too maverick. It's just too pushing it beyond comfort zone, the way I've been trained in business, my current experiences. Is there kind of like a middle ground, would you say, where you can almost have this mindset and you can play with it when a moment presents itself, rather than saying, I'm going to be an anarchist for the day and that's it, I'm just going to be complete maverick? Is there a kind of almost like a halfway house, or do you have to be all in?
Well, anarchy these days, you could think like, okay, societal expectations. You can't really be an anarchist and be accepted by everybody. Okay, let's just forget about that veil for just a moment here. So, kind of what we're talking about requires one thing across the board, any circumstance, any situation, any individual. And that is a very deep, deep knowledge of who you are as a person, as a business entity, as whatever. The more true you are to that, it means that you know your morals, your values, what you find to be a generally respectable mission in life. Perhaps the way that you were called to serve whatever you're doing. So, okay, if you hold on to that aspect and you say, all right, maybe I do want to try this whole anarchist kind of mentality for just a day, then you're going to be trying something new. So as you try new things, you're going to be stressing yourself. You're stepping out of your comfort zone. So if you're open and accepting to the fluidity that is just simply newness, new to you, perhaps, um, it's a stressing agent on the body, on the mind, the soul, even depending on how deep you get. So you need to be able to reground yourself. And that is why you need to know exactly who you are, what you value. Because if you can't bring yourself back from all these different new experiences, that's where the exhaustion and the people crash and all that stuff. We don't want that in this process, because if we're doing the exploratory practice, a lot of it's going to be new. So you need to be able to embrace the newness and explore, but bring it back to the core of who you are. So if newness is not your thing, and it's not for everybody, having that flexibility, whether through circumstance, simply your own personality. A lot of people don't like to, encounter new things regularly. And so, okay, think about this. I just walked a runway. I'm 5'6". I'm way too short for runway. So it was a nonprofit. It was a charity. This is 2 days ago, and fantastic experience. It was a charitable fundraiser overall. They raised 100K. I think about it like a Pilates class. I lift weights regularly. That's my daily. Pilates is something that, all right, maybe I'll go do and experience this like just one time. Now, what this affords me is the ability to say, okay, I know how people operate sort of in the Pilates sense. I'm not an expert by any means, but I've seen it firsthand. I feel it. And now it's something that I can incorporate into my weightlifting practice, the practice that is innately mine, or, that I feel the most comfortable in, whatever. So it's in these moments of brief anarchy that even if for only a day or simply less than, okay, it's experience gained. And then how do we bring that experience back to what is grounded in us? That's what this practice is that we're talking about. Anarchy isn't simply just go cause complete and utter chaos all the time. You're probably going to be disliked by many for that. So, within reason, go explore, go learn some new stuff, and then bring it back to you. If you don't know what you value, what you love, what truly moves you through life, then you need to begin there. You can't think about the anarchy until you can very objectively look at exactly who you are, what your business practice is, and then, and only then, can you go explore.
I love the way that this is really accessible then, because I think, I guess my mind was going in the direction of this almost is a life change. It's almost like you've got to be all in, you've got to really commit. But actually what you're saying is that, and coming back to our little analogy of the building blocks, these are tiny little steps that you can, because it is just for a day, you're not committing to a life-changing experience here. You don't have to move states or whatever. It's not that big a deal. It's actually just little things that can maybe add another context or another texture or another color, or just a little tonal thing. This is not big stuff, is it?
One
So
more color
anybody should be able to do it.
Yeah. That's it. It's another life experience, and bada bing, bada boom. That's what carves the human. That's what carves you, Neil. That's me. We take to this conversation, even if we're not talking very directly about it. It's all these tiny little experiences that, as we color up this conversation, that's what we're painting with right now. That's just what makes for an interesting life, in my mind.
So you said earlier about AI being almost this bad beast that is coming to get us all. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing what you said, of course, but it kind of sort of implied that you weren't a big fan and that the human kind of feels like it's going out of it. But if somebody's listening to this or watching this and thinking, okay, I want to have a little play, I want to do this kind of anarchy for a day thing, because I think I could, and I've got a few days next week when I've got some space or whatever. So I'm just going to pick a day. I'm just going to go for it. But I don't actually know what I want to explore or venture into, or that would be appropriate for me on that day. Would something like AI, though, be a great little kind of almost prompter where you could put in, have a chat with ChatGPT, other services are available, and say, look, I'm going to do this anarchy for a day thing. I probably do want to engage with Kyle at some point, but I want to just have a little test day before I engage with Kyle, and just kind of have a play. But I need some ideas of what I might want to explore. Would that be a good solution?
Totally. Go to, I'm walking in New York. I was out there with my dad recently, and so we went to explore one specific museum that my dad had his sights set on, and we get there. Turns out it was closed that day. We didn't know that. And in ChatGPT, I'm like, all right, well, we're walking here, so we're within walking distance. How can we find a like experience to this museum that's still accessible and that will give us that same kind of feel, vibe of we're interested in arts and culture and all that good stuff. And it just half a mile down points us to another museum. It was a fantastic, just in the moment. And my dad's like, wow, okay, cool. He's maybe not as techie, but okay, so that's a very trivial example. But yeah, no, ChatGPT or whatever the different platform is that you use, Tell it about yourself. Give it the knowledge of who you are, and then say, but I got to switch it up. I got to do something to, I don't, I can't even make up a situation because it's strictly on an individual basis. If you're talking about simply just figuring out like new experiences or how do I try out this like anarchy for a day thing, it comes down to just train it up, give it the background and who you are, and it's great technology. It can point you in the right direction. Chances are. So yeah,
Mm.
it's a heck of a tool in a lot of ways. I'm not completely anti AI. It's a fantastic way to streamline business. Um, I mean, we can save tremendous amounts of money. The okay, so here's one of the realities. Like right now, I'm rebranding a manufacturing consultant. So in the initial like pitch conversation that I had with this guy, what I said is, look, everything that I'm going to do, you can do with AI. That costs $20 a month. So there's a very real world where I don't need to be part of the conversation whatsoever. So I need not force myself upon anybody. But what he says is, after I walked him through the exact steps of, okay, I'm going to use AI. That's a given. Anybody should, because it's a tremendous tool that will streamline many processes. But AI is only as useful as what you put into it. And there are building blocks, there are essentially steps that need to be taken in order to do essentially the right pre work before you get to the really, the juicy work, which is, for somebody who's an innately just creative individual, that's the rebranding itself. But you can only rebrand when you know what the landscape looks like. So go do the research, go build, go figure it out. So understanding the processes is just as important. Does that make sense?
Mm. Totally makes sense, and I think it's just really interesting hearing you come at this from an actual practical example there, because yeah, it is something that I'm seeing in a whole bunch of different industries and different levels of role, and everybody I think is being affected by this, and it's always refreshing when I hear somebody say it's about the process. You've got to know your process, and it is just so true, and it really is. In whatever you're doing, small, medium, or large business, private life, in the whole anarchy space that we're talking about here, it is still about process, isn't it? And if somebody kind of goes down the track and has maybe a couple of days, maybe 3 days, maybe even more, they start to build this habit of anarchy and kind of self-awareness building and testing and pushing the boundaries of what they thought was possible. And then they want to maybe come and connect with you, Kyle. What kind of service? Tell us a little about this, about the services that you offer and the kind of clients that you're working with, and maybe if there's a good fit for somebody listening or watching this, what would they be like? What kind of person would ideally work with you?
Easiest way to sum that up is I look for the builders, the makers, the individuals that are inspired to do it. We've been talking for a little over half hour. It's like every single bit of this conversation is indicative of the individual who's aware of the fact that they want to kind of be a little iffy. you know Go explore, go fail, go, heck, even scare yourself. I don't know, that's part of this process. That individual, the maker, is the individual that embraces the importance of that. I mean, that's the basis of everything we've spoken about regarding anarchy. So that's the mindset, the mentality of the individual that I am probably best suited for. Those people, it's just, I need to get to know you, your background, what kind of business, service offering, product you have. And it's within those confines then that I can either, swing you through an entire course offering of what I understand is probably the best practices in the digital marketing stance, which is still an ever changing landscape. But because I now know you, what I can advise on is very simply, it's just from a, think about it from like a project manager's stance, from budget to resources being people, to your own personal skill sets. What are you capable of? Because if I come in advising and saying, well, you're going to need 250K for this, campaign or euro in your sense, then it's not going to make sense for everybody. It's an ill-advised approach, and from a coach's standpoint, it's not a great way of doing it. So the understanding needs to be there. I need to work with you to figure out, all right, who are you, what makes sense, and how is it that we can carve a path for you that's going to inevitably point you hopefully in the direction of your blue ocean. And if not, okay, then let's remove some of the barriers that are inhibiting you from figuring out who are you at your very core, and how is it that you go about exploring that process. So that to me is the coaching practice, whether it's more of an advisor to the individual who's the cheerleader. Because the honest answer is, the moment you endeavor the entrepreneurial path, it's a lot of work, and a lot of people move, like, they lose the juice to keep going because they get beaten down so often. So I don't know if it's grit, drive, or just sheer stupidity that keeps people like me still going. But everybody's got some driving agent, so whatever that is, you got to stay true to that.
Final question for you, Carl, because I know you're a busy guy and I know you need to get on, but are you hopeful for the future? We're sat here having this conversation. Does the future fill you with kind of feelings of, yeah, we can do this collectively, collaboratively? Are you feeling good?
You're talking to a very hardcore realist, and I don't want to hit you with such a negative answer, so I'm going to say I don't know. I think that we are in such a liminal space. In some cases, we're so blinded by the political field, and some people get caught up in that alone. Where technology is, it is a tremendous tool, which also means it's very powerful. Now, that kind of power, if misused, can be very dangerous. So if we can figure out how we can best move forward within reason and bound, then I think there's more to come. We are innovators, humans. This technology has the opportunity to rob us of that entire skill set and innovation, because it can do it faster than we ever will. But within new confines, humans have lasted as long as we have because we're resilient, and we become something new in that moment. We rise to whatever the new occasion is, and we are in a very, very rapidly changing environment here as far as technology goes, if we're only talking about that. So if things are changing as quickly as they are, we may not truly know exactly where they're going to end up, where things are going to be right now. I anticipate, though, that we can very simply rise to the occasion. I hope it doesn't cripple us in the process, though.
I love your honesty, and that is exactly the answer I was looking for. I was not looking for a sugar-coated answer, and I didn't think I was going to get it from you, Carl, either. So thank you for your honesty. It is much appreciated. So basically what we're saying, I think probably as a conclusion kind of statement, is that we're kind of hoping that we can all embrace our inner anarchist, really, because we have to welcome the change that is inevitably, well, it's already here, but inevitably coming at an ever greater pace and rate and scale.
Yeah. The sheer ability to embrace your inner cockroach, be able to take a hit, bend and flex with whatever comes. I think in a changing time like this, that is one of the most important attributes that, as humans, if we don't already have that, that is something that we should be able to work on, so that we can be able to say, like, all right, these are changing times. Whatever happens, though, I'm here for it.
Kyle Asperger, thank you so much for your time today.
Neil, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.